found myself drawn down there because my son was in recovery and he was about ready to die. So I felt I had to come down here, and after 5 years and help with al-anon, I finally let him go, and then he got better. So
I'm delighted to hear that.
Yeah, he's been in recovery for 1.5 years. Along with him moving back, I have a 2-year-old son who's autistic. So it's like suddenly it's a challenge to find just the space and the time to...
A 2-year-old?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's been a challenge to put the teachings to practical work, you know?
Right. Do you have help with this? Do you have a significant other that...
No.
No?
Mm-hmm.
So you're...
I'm winging it.
Winging it on your own, I see.
I mean, they're flourishing, so
Uh-huh.
I have to just be careful that I don't, you know, I don't know what the word is, just neglect myself or,
Mm-hmm.
so. This was good today. It's part of self-care. My new thing is self-care.
Uh-huh. Now, have you, in your Al-Anon program, have you actually gone through the 12 steps?
I'm on my third step.
On your third.
Okay, I'm slow.
Preparing for
But
the fourth. Uh-huh.
it's been great.
So, if you're interested, I wrote a book called The Way of Powerlessness.
I just got it.
Oh,
I
okay.
just got a couple of your books, so that'll get me started.
Yeah, and so this is, my experience is that the 12 steps that are utilized in Al-Anon are very similarly grounded as are these non-dual teachings. That they are pointing to a fundamental powerlessness that has its roots in the absence of being independent. So may take you a short time to get used to my language, because I use words slightly differently than other teachers that you've been exposed to might. But for me, I use the term the false sense of authorship to represent this characteristic that human beings have around the age of 2 years old, in which they lose this sense of being connected to everything. It's not even a sense. It is just, there is the connection. That connection is then shrouded by the sense that I am independent, that I am not only separate from things, but I am independent of other things. So the metaphor that you may have heard that is used often to talk about this is that of the ocean and the wave. So if all there is ocean, then each of us are waves, movements of this ocean. And in this metaphor, there's nothing else. All there is ocean. But at the age of 2, this human wave has the most profound sense that I'm not a wave. I am not this identity as this thing. I am actually a droplet. So I am independent of everything else. Everything else is droplets too. So me and you and this and that, these are all independent things. And it is that shift, and it's a subtle one, from the identification as the wave to falsely identifying as a droplet, because droplets can't exist. There is nothing other than ocean. So you can't have the ocean plus something. All there is ocean. So this is the basic pointer of Advaita, which is means not two. That all of these separate things, this wave, this person, that person, they are all fundamentally one thing. But that doesn't mean that we're not separate from each other. You see, as one wave is separate from another wave. There has to be that separation in order for there to be relationship. In order for me to talk to you, in order for us to love one another, for us to experience one another, there has to be this separation, you from me. But what brings the suffering is not the separation. That only enables experience, which is pleasure and pain. Those things are possible because of this separation of one wave to another. But the understanding that these waves are not independent of one another is what all I talk about. It is the false sense of being independent, which manifests as the sense that I have the power to author things, to control things. That's how that sense of being independent becomes our living reality. I make things happen. I am responsible. I control. It's up to me. And that's the root of human suffering. From the age of 2 years old, we begin to suffer. Prior to that, there's pleasure and pain, as there is throughout the life cycle. Joy and sorrow, happiness and sadness. The whole polaric opposite spectrum happens because we are separate. But the suffering arises because we have the false sense of being independent. Now, many teachings you may have already encountered say the problem is you think you're separate. You think you're a wave. You have to get rid of this identity and identify as the ocean. And once you know that you are the limitless, spaciousness of the ocean, then you're going to be fine. It's good on paper, but it just doesn't translate into actual living experience because the separation is built into the system. Our senses create separation. The fact that we have mental activity creates separation. And that's a good thing because it's the basis on all of the experience of life. Now, if you don't want that, there's suicide, there's drugs, there's all kinds of experiences in which you can basically remove yourself from the experience of life. If that's your desire, there are avenues for that. But what I'm concerned with, and what this teaching here is concerned with, is living without suffering. Which is not living without pain. It's not living without difficulty. But it's living without suffering, which is this explosion of the pain of the moment into the past and the future. So when we talk about being in the now contains the pleasure or pain of the moment. But it isn't projected into the past and the future of what did I do to make this pain come? What do I have to do to make the pain go away? What if it never goes away? I should never have done it in the first place. All that, which is the suffering around the pain, is what we're saying is not necessary in order for living to happen. But pleasure and pain are necessary components for living as we normally think of it to occur.
It's a lot of conditioning to undo.
Well, you know, when we look at this term conditioning, it's an interesting one. Because when we're not actually conditioned to feel that we are independent. That sense of independence arises in every human being, virtually, at the age of 2. It's a quality or a characteristic of being human. And it's shared universally, independent of cultures, independent of how enlightened the parents are. At around 2 years old, the human organism suddenly develops this sense that I'm independent. Now, the conditioning is happening theoretically from before birth. That the human organism is influenced by all of these, by the energies that penetrate into the womb, the sounds, the chemicals that the mother excretes as a result of her conditioning, her conditions. All of these things condition the organism. Then from birth, the place they're born, the situation they're born into, all of these things further condition the infant. And every moment, what we hear, what we think, and what we feel conditions us. So the conditioning is inevitable. The only thing about the conditioning is that it's not static. The conditioning is dynamic. It's changing every instant. And so, in this teaching, as I talk about it, the conditioning isn't what limits us. Our conditioning is part of who we are in this moment. This reactive organism, this feeling, thinking organism, is a product of its, the term I use is programming, which is your genetic predisposition, how you come out the chute, so to speak, genetically, combined with all of the subsequent experience, which is the conditioning. These two things combine to be the programming of this moment. So everything that you've experienced, combined with all of your genetic predisposition, that's what combines to be you. This unique person with these qualities and these characteristics in this moment. And what you're hearing now, what you're feeling now in this space, all is changing your program. So that you will walk out of here a different person than when you walked in. For better or for worse. I'm not suggesting that it's necessarily going to be an improvement. But you will be a different person. So understanding who you are, that you are in fact this combination of factors, is crucial to being present with who you are and what you are and what is happening. And that's step 4, actually. I mean, to take an inventory of yourself. To say, what? I mean, at its root, this 4th step is about saying, what the hell am I? What, I mean, what have I done? What are my qualities? What are my characteristics? What, I mean, how do I act towards people? How do I act towards myself? These are the questions that you when you take an inventory of yourself, that you may, if you do it thoroughly, get to the root of yourself. You know, to begin to recognize that what you are is a product of all of these forces. That you are, you know, a product of this Catholic family. You are a product of having been living with these other people in this culture, in this country, in this religion, in these circumstances. That having met this person, having gone to this place, all of these things have made you what you are today.
The causes and conditions.
The causes and the conditions. That is absolutely correct. Combined with your fundamental nature. You know, those are often very difficult to separate, you know, but you can begin to see patterns in yourself. You say, you know, I tend to be a reticent person. I tend to be an aggressive person. I tend to approach things in a certain way from my basic nature, my basic energy. And you may be able to see into this. And so you can perhaps begin to recognize this combination of factors, both genetic, we'll call it your hardwiring, and your software, your programming, which is constantly being updated, which is in flux.
My preference is to bypass the fourth step and just be nothing, but I guess you have to go through that.
Yes.
Is it essential that it's part of the path of getting to space or the nothingness? Do you have to do this?
But what I was saying is that if you really want nothingness, the nothingness you can get with drugs, you can get it through, that's nothingness.
Not that kind. You know the kind.
No, I know what you're pointing at, but if you've had this experience of spaciousness, I assume, because I'll ask you, have you had an experience of kind of everything opening up and you have this feeling of the connection of things?
I do, but it doesn't last.
Okay. And so the assumption is that lasting is what is the quote goal, that to have that all the time. That's generally thought of as being the nothingness or the spaciousness or the silent awareness or whatever the terms are. That is the enlightenment. That is the ultimate understanding. That spiritual experience all the time. And it is the most natural kind of conclusion to draw. But that may not be the case.
No, well, there's the pain of holding on to that too. You know, you can't. So it seems to be about letting go over and over and over of all of it.
Well, that is the seeking. The seeking is the letting go and the grabbing on. The letting go and the grabbing on. The letting go and the grabbing on. When there's the letting go, there's the space. When there's the grabbing on, there's the contraction. And this, what my guru, this guy, Ramesh Valsekar, he called it the flip-flop. Mm. And it is the flip-flop of the seeker. And that is what characterizes the seeking. Most people don't know what you're talking about. but you know what we're talking about. So that condition is what the seeking is about. So, and this particular teaching is not focused on the goal of that space, having that space all the time, or whatever, however you characterize it in your mind as being the objective. This teaching, what I call the living teaching, is about living. This, what we're doing here. And to see what this is about. To not transcend this, not to get away from this, but to fully absorb it, to absorb it, be absorbed by it, to be it. Because this is what we are.
In order to transcend it?
No.
Okay.
Not in order to transcend it. To be it. When we talk about transcending it, we're talking about entering some alternate space, which is what we conceptualize because of our experience as seekers, flipping and flopping. So you conceive of this space, which is the flip space, in contrast to the flop space. And you say, okay, we have to transcend the flop space to be in our true nature, which is the flip space. That's the normal model. But in this teaching, we're pointing to that which contains the flip and the flop, which is this.
Holding it all. Okay.
Okay? Which is not transcending this, but rather seeing it as part of the whole.
You know, this experience I have now of this addict, who's a recovering addict, and this 2-year-old.
Right.
So interesting. I'm used to traveling around the world and doing all kinds of like things, you know, enjoyable things. So it's
Right.
put me in the middle of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken 8 months so far and it's getting better, of not having the aversion to just being trapped and stuck and just being in it. And the beauty is definitely there. I mean, it's beautiful to watch people grow and become, but it's been interesting. And I found that the only thing that really saves me is not to think. I mean, it's just like snuffed out thinking. I can't afford thoughts anymore, because the thoughts are usually fearful or regretful, or it's just not there. If it starts, it's gone. I can't, if you understand, I can't afford the luxury of thinking anymore.
Well,
not in that, you know what I mean, ruminating and wondering and
right.
worrying and regretting, and that's just, I don't have any time for it or patience for it.
Well, with grace, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And so what we're focused on here in this teaching is that which produces this kind of thinking that you're talking about, which is, again, here's my term for it, secondary involvement. So you have the primary experience, which is what's happening. These people are in your life. What is happening is you are in this house in Orange County, in the United States, and this is the primary experience. And your ability to recognize this experience requires thinking. I mean, mental activity. So that's the primary thinking. The secondary involvement is this process that you say you don't have time for, that it's the one that brings the suffering. The could-haves, the should-haves, the would-haves, the have-tos, the feeling that, how am I going to manage?
Well, there's the ego and arrogance right there.
But this is the claim of authorship.
Doership, you mean? Same?
No.
Different?
Different. In my language. Authorship is distinctly different from doership. Because you must do certain things. You must get up in the morning. You must brush your teeth. You must care for this 2-year-old in various ways because it is in your nature to do it. There is some quality or characteristic in you that moves you to do this and not call social services, say, come, I can't handle it, you have to take this child, and I'm going to India.
That's happened to him 4 times, okay? I can't do that to him anymore.
Okay, but you can't. You can't.
No, you.
You can't. 3 other people could. You can't. So what is it about you that propels you to do this? You see? That's the inventory. This is the question about what is it that makes you who you are to get up in the morning and act in the way that you act, to do what you do. The question this teaching raises is, are you the author of what you do? Now, you have looked at it enough to intellectually conclude, of course not, can't possibly be. And yet, the fact that these thoughts do arise, that I shouldn't have done that, I could have done it differently, those thoughts that you are talking about that you don't have the time for, they come. And you can cut them off, you can not pursue them, but they still arise. Even if for a millisecond or whatever, before you say, no, I've got to cut this off, I don't have time for this or whatever. But they arise. So they arise out of something. And that which they arise out of is what I'm calling this false sense of authorship, the sense of independence that comes at the age of 2, and that is diminished in the seeing. So you have already begun to see it, and thus, for you, its power comes and goes. Most people never see it, and its power is perpetual, persistent. The claim of the false sense of authorship is always there. So there's always the feeling, yes, I'm responsible, it's up to me, and the underlying anxiety and fear are there as well, because they come as part of the package. With that sense that I'm personally responsible. I make it happen. It's up to me. So in the 12 steps, the first step is the whole thing. The whole thing is in the first step. I'm powerless over this. That's the entry point. You know, something beats your ass bad enough that you've got to go, okay, I'm powerless over that. But then they throw in this kicker, which is, and my life, like everything, is unmanageable. Meaning, I can't control it. I can't manage it. I don't have the ability to do it. And so, that's the opening. That's the point at which the insight can come. Now, if you got step 1 100% from the beginning, you don't need the next 10 steps. Because the next 10 steps are all about bringing about the recognition of the first step, which is what they talk about in the 12th step, is having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, then we, carry the message to other people.
That's why most people come back to the first step all the time, right?
Exactly, because that's where the juice is. Yeah. That's where the entire, quote, truth resides. Everything else that comes at the next 10 steps are all about facilitating a deeper recognition of the truth of the first step, that we're not in control, that we don't have power, inherent power. Whatever power we have to do anything, starting with breathing, we're given.
Or we're being breathed, as Byron Katie says.
Okay? But what it means is that there is some power greater than ourselves, our egoic selves, responsible for what we do. If we're being breathed, that means that every action that follows, every thought, everything we physically do or feel is dependent on that which is breathing us. Because without that, we don't exist. There's nothing. So everything is dependent on that. Nothing is dependent on us. That's the insight that these next 10 steps are designed to bring about. A recognition of the truth of the first step.
Well, then that opening you're talking about in the first step is such an invitation to surrender everything and throw it into the fire. Like,
it is, but virtually everybody, including me, who I've ever talked to who's experienced that, has burnt fingers from pulling the shit back out again.
yeah, you're right.
Yep, okay, here, you have it, God, it's all yours. Wait a second, he said this. No, this, you might not have my best interest at heart on this one. So, I'm not going to surrender the possibility of this. What if it turns out shitty? No, I think I better exercise a little influence on this one. And that's virtually everyone's experience that I've ever talked to in regards to this, and my own personal experience. So that surrender, when it comes, that spiritual awakening they talk about in the 12th step, which is the final dissolution, not really a surrender. It is actually the death of that sense of authorship. The one that comes and goes, the one that creates the flipping and the flopping. It's not always there, but it's active and then it's not active. When that is gone, revealed to be the Shimmeron, the non-existent thing that it is, in that is the final understanding, if you will, the death of the false sense of authorship. But the curious thing is it doesn't produce that sense of spaciousness and unity and oneness that you experience as a seeker. Because that's dependent on the flop to exist. In order for there to be the expansion, there has to be the contraction. When there is neither expansion or contraction, it's a whole different paradigm. It's a whole different game. But that's neither here nor there. There's nothing to describe. There's nothing there. What is there is this. This is the only thing, which is your experience of this moment.
You talk about the flip and the flop. For some reason, my mind, I've always had this image of a swinging door. One way it swings to the manifest world, the other way it swings to awareness or presence, and just, it's following the swinging door. I'm tired of it. Is the truth? I'm saying I just, I know.
We personal pronouns are okay. You can say I, and no one's going to accuse you of being unenlightened.
And I'm not so holy with these people in my house. There are times I think, what the hell did you do this for? It's like, but there was no me doing it. when the police show up with a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old and covered with filth, you have to do what you have to do. You do it. Someone brought a cat here that was abused. You know, you would.
You would.
Yeah, I guess I should ask why. I know what in me is the.
Not why, but what. So the teaching in the inventory is not why did I do this or why did I do that, but an inventory is not why did I buy this thing, why is this thing on the shelf, it's what's there. Mm-hmm. So this is the essence of what we're concerned with. What's here? What's here as you? What qualities and characteristics are here? And when you get out of the why, which spins you off into Never Never Land, very quickly, when you're going, why am I like this? Well, and the stories abound. But the what state keeps you grounded. What am I? What's here? What is this? You know, what is it that I do? What is it that I've done? And if you do that, you begin maybe to see patterns, you begin to recognize something very profound about what you are. And if there's grace, then this process is one in which there isn't a lot of recrimination and judgment about what you are. But there's always some, and that's what makes the process often very difficult, is because when you dredge up these things that you have done that haven't been so pretty and haven't been so generous and kind and loving, and you begin to recognize some of the darker aspects of yourself, then often that's accompanied by, this is fuel for the false sense of authorship, the sense that I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't be this way, this is bad, this is wrong, that I should be other than I am. That's the voice that often comes in and attaches to such negative memories and experiences. But all the inventory is simply as dispassionate as possible list of what it is you are, what it is you've done, what it is you feel. And so that can bring tremendous insight as you do it. Not guaranteed, but a lot of people have reported tremendous benefits from that process.
Must be resistant to the fourth step because definitely.
Well, you are not alone.
Okay.
It's often said that this is what separates the men from the boys. That fourth step is what the point at which people actually either kind of drift in sort of a never land of neither here nor there, or actually come into the meat of the program. It's a hurdle, so to speak. And it blocks a lot of people. So whether you are empowered to do it or not, we can only see.
Get there eventually, I think.
Maybe. We have no idea. I mean, we truly don't. Because the understanding, the recognition of our own powerlessness is that we have to be given the power to do it. We don't generate the power from our egoic selves. But, okay, yeah, all right. Well, one of these days I'm going to decide to do it and then I'll do it. Well, that's only true as far as it goes. Yes, one day you may decide to do it and be given the power to do it. Because you know the story of the 5 frogs sitting on the log and 3 of them decide to jump off? Okay, 5 frogs sitting on the log, 3 of them decide to jump off. How many are left?
4. Oh, you said 3 jump off?
3 jump off. 3, no, I said there's 5 frogs sitting on a log. 3 of them decide to jump off. How many are left?
2.
5. They decided to jump off, but they never did.
Okay.
See? So the decision to do something, as you well know, does not necessarily follow into action. So what is it that produces the action? Clearly not the decision. Decision may or may not accompany the action. And the action certainly may or may not accompany the decision. That we're sure of from your own experience. So what is it that produces the action?
Choice.
No, we said you make the choice.
But choice is different than decision.
How?
I think of decision as mental. Choice is more instinctual or intuitive.
Okay, but still, if you're saying that all of your choices do translate into action, the choice is what produces the action, then we'll have to back up a step and say what produces the choice. How is it that this choice occurred rather than some other choice occurred? So what produced the choice? How is it that that choice became action?
That's a good question.
That's why I make the big money.
I remember when in a courtroom one time when a lawyer said, "Do you want this baby?" I thought, I didn't say it out loud. I thought, no, I don't want this. I mean, I knew I didn't want it. But then when the time came, when he was covered in filth and suffering, he couldn't breathe, and the choice came from a different place.
Right. So, you were empowered in that moment to say yes. And what the teaching points you to look at is deeper into where this is coming from. The claim of authorship is that at some level I am responsible. That either subtly or overtly, and it gets subtler and subtler and subtler as you get deeper into it. This claim of authorship gets really wispy and difficult to feel, but it's there. And it's there in the difficulty, it's there in the suffering, it's there in the anxiety, it's there in the fear.
Is it always bad?
No, it's not always bad. It can bring relief. The claim of authorship, look what a great person I am. Pride. That pride feels good briefly. While you're sitting in the pride of what a great how you're, what a good person you are, how you're doing the right thing, that all of these, that sense that you are responsible for this great thing that's happening. That in the moment is a very positive feeling. Unfortunately, it carries on the back of it the load of guilt, because the pride always flips, when the door flips the other way, into guilt. I shouldn't have. This bad situation, I'm responsible for it, because if you're responsible for the good one, then at some level, you're responsible for the bad one. And it's inevitable.
Extension of this, the good news is that my son in recovery is going to be given full custody of this child, so he's mentally ill, so they will have to probably stay with me, but at least more and more he's taking over. So that's the PS good news about this. But,
Uh-huh.
and you know,
Perhaps.
yeah.
I mean, we really don't know what the future
No.
will hold, and whether, you know, this is good or bad. It changes moment to moment. That's
In terms of authorship, I'm hoping, you know, it could be passed to where it belongs to.
oh, that's no, you're not authorship, doership. You're hoping that
Oh.
he'll take some of the load of some of the doing off of you.
And he is.
That's great. I mean, I
But you know, when you have bipolar and you're an addict, anything can happen. So it's a bit of a walking on eggshells, you know.
yes,
Okay, that's the truth of it. So.
yeah.
But everyone's walking on eggshells about something in here. You know, we all are.
Everybody has their issues.
All the time.
Everybody has their life stuff. There's no question about it. And so what we're concerned with in the living teaching is how to, not how to, but this recognition that life as it is happening. And by extension, how it will also be happening. As opposed to my authored doing.
But what about nothing's happening? I mean, the great sages say nothing's really happening. Ramana says there are no others. It's all a passing show. I mean,
well, there's different, you know, whenever you start getting into scripture, which is the writings of sages, the reputed utterances of sages in a particular moment, you're walking on very loose ground. So these pointers can be understood at different levels, and most sages, and Ramana was no exception, spoke to people in accordance with their receptivity. He could, in a living teaching, the teacher and the student, the guru and the disciple, are in a dance in the moment. And so the guru who has a beginning dancer is not going to twirl them around in this exotic move. We'll take it very simple and gentle, you know, and move them basically, comfortably, and lead them into perhaps more complexity. But so you have different teachings for different people, different levels of teaching. So you can, all of it, the crucial thing, if you leave here with nothing other than this today, I will feel that my job was well done, which is that nothing that any sage has ever said is the truth. Including Ramana, including Jesus, including Buddha, including Nisargadatta, including whoever your favorite is. Not one single utterance has ever been the truth. Every single word is a pointer to something deeper and more profound. So when a sage says there is nothing and no one, this pointer may well be to the fact that there is nothing independent that exists. There's nothing that exists independently. That is the illusion of independence. That this thing and that thing exist on their own. They don't. They are all movements, waves of a singular consciousness. that doesn't even exist as a thing. So that even that is nothing, no thing. These are the deeper, far more sophisticated teachings. But at what level someone comes to them and understands them, it varies greatly.
There are times during glimpses, I call them glimpses, not really. You know what he's saying, but then it's gone. You know. So.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very well. So I dumped a ton of shit on you today, and please recognize that none of it is true. Everything that I've said has simply been a variety. There have been a variety of pointers. Which one will enter? Which one will impact you? Which one will fester and grow? Who knows? I have no idea.
I don't feel any Velcro on me. I don't feel like anything's stuck. It just went. It's fine. It's good.
Yeah.
No, good.
All I'm hopeful of is that something will have penetrated in a way that you don't even realize, and that will grow like a cancer grows, and gradually replacing you with itself.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. Sometimes there's that grace. You never know. But the universe dropped you here today. And what the impact of that will be, we'll have to see. You're certainly welcome whenever we have these meetings to come.